Lloyd Vance's Insider Football is back on 1029 The Game, the Coast Sports Network. So glad everybody can join us this evening. Another great week here on the show, and we're looking forward to talking to everybody about Week 15 around the National Football League. I'm joined by my co-host, partner in crime, Kevin Midgette. How you doing this evening?
What's going on, Lloyd? How we doing?
Good, man. It's crazy. It's rainy and it's wet here where we are in the northeastern part of the country, and but they got the games in yesterday, and um, we're coming down a home stretch. It's almost like you got that date where you're like, oh, you got to drive that family member to the airport, and they're going to go away, and the season's going to be like that. Before we know it, it's going to be gone. So are you enjoying it? What are you thinking? What are you thinking in terms of the season? Has it lived up to the hype, or there's still more to come?
I think it took a long time this year to decide who was a legitimate playoff team and who was not. I think there's still a couple teams where you could say they're borderline playoff material. What are they going to do in the postseason? But we had a level, I don't want to say mediocrity, parity probably is a better word for it. There's a lot of teams that are in the middle of the bell curve there. There's a few on the top and a few on the bottom, but it's just sorting out the rest.
Yeah, and I'm going to get your opinion on do we have our Final Four in a second, but I totally agree with you, Kevin. I titled this "The Haves and the Have-Nots Around the National Football League," and you know, this season more than any other ones that I've covered or talked about, it's crazy because I feel like there's so many have-nots around the team, just brutal teams that have already been forked. They suck. You don't even want to watch them. And I'll start right up in New York. You have New York Giants 2-12. You have the Jets 4-10. Yeah, they pulled out a win. We'll talk about that briefly. The Panthers 3-11. Jaguars 3-11. The Bears, who I think are going to lose tonight, they're 4-9. You have the Titans 3-11, Browns 3-11, Raiders 3-11, and the Patriots 3-11. I mean, it's crazy. And some of these were once proud franchises. I mean, am I missing something here, or can these teams turn around from this have-not region?
I think a lot of them have lived there for most of their franchise's existence, with the exception of maybe a few runs by a couple of these teams. A lot of them haven't even been relevant since I was a kid in the 80s. So that was their last runs for the most part. It all starts with the quarterback. You have to get the quarterback and you have to build from there. Out of the have nots, I think New England got Drake May. They might have a shot on that one. Unless you get that quarterback, you don't even have the beginning of a building block.
Yeah, that's a great point. And we've seen a lot of these teams actually get rid of their coaches as well, or they got a new coach who's trying to feel their way, and they'll probably have a new coach next season, like the Bears, and th- you want that building block though, like you're saying, the quarterback. So the Bears, yes, they have their quarterback. The Patriots, they have their quarterback, but you look at the Giants. Is Brian Daboll going to survive? Joe Shane. You saw them all in Hard Knocks in the off-season version, and they were like, "Oh, Saquon leaving that hurts us so much." But I just felt like they just underprepared, and there's some malfeasance in terms of the Giants. And their team's so bad. I mean, they're abysmal.
I think if you're the Giants, you clean house. You have to start from the top, and that goes with the GM. It goes with the head coach. It's everyone has to go. It's like an etch a sketch. You almost have to shake it and start new again with that franchise, and that's the only way they're going to be able to. I mean, they have maybe you get neighbors you have at wide receiver. Tracy's actually had a decent season for them as a running back, but as a team as a whole, there's a lot of work to do there.
There's a ton there, and a lot of people I talk to are Giants fans, or they're not. We'll never know because they started wearing the bags up there. I remember, Philadelphia fans were wearing those bags the end of Ray Rhodes' last season, and it was made famous by the Saints way back in the day, the Aints. But the Giants fans, you got to feel for them, and they're 2-12. We'll see if they're able to keep the number one overall pick. The Raiders, who are going to play this evening, they're another team that's right up there. They're 2-11. I think they're going to get boat raced tonight by Atlanta, a team that needs a team win very bad. But yeah, so many teams that are have-nots. And then I want to talk about the haves. Now, I almost feel like, Kevin, we know who the Final Four is going to be around the National Football League: the Eagles, the Lions, the Chiefs, the Bills. Are there any other teams that we think out of the haves and just probably the Vikings or Packers that we think could jump into this mix, or do we know our final four? And how do you think it's going to shake out with 3 weeks left in the regular season?
I think we have our final three. I think the big surprise to keep an eye on is watching Detroit fall out of the final four. Once again, they suffered a bunch of injuries on Sunday, and it's just been adding on, and they're just giving up points left and right. That's a thing. That last game of the season against Minnesota, believe it or not, that could mean something right there. Minnesota's hung in there as much as like myself has even doubted that team. They just win and go forward. So that last game of the season could actually mean something.
Yeah, and the Vikings, when I watch them though, I still think I'm like, all right, they remind me of the 2017 team with Case Keenum. They're getting W's. Yes, they look good. The record looks nice, but I think in the postseason, when push comes to shove, you're going to see the real Sam Darnold, and it's the same guy we've known for so many years. So, uh, but in terms of, and we're going to go heavy, everybody, this week in the Bills versus the Lions, the Eagles versus Steelers, because these were the marquee games around the National Football League. But I do agree with you that the Lions, there's so many injuries, you just starting to wonder, are they going to be able to snap out of this? And just today, it came out their injury report. David Montgomery, torn MCL, out for the season. Carlton Davis, fractured jaw. He's a cornerback for him. He's going to be out for quite some time. If maybe they make the Super Bowl, he can come back. And then they lose defensive tackle Aleem McNeil to an ACL. So that's on top of Anzalone with the broken forearm. And of course, everybody knows Hutchinson with that grotesque ankle injury. So, um, yeah, what did you think in terms of the Lions? Can they overcome this? And I'll go over their schedule coming up and the three top teams in the NFC, because that's what everybody's really looking at. So you have Detroit's going to play at Chicago, at San Francisco, and then they finish with Minnesota. You said key game there. The Eagles at Washington, Dallas, Giants, and then Minnesota at Seattle, Green Bay, and at Detroit. So I think the Vikings really has a tough end of season stretch there, but I think the Eagles are going to jump up and possibly take the number one seed.
I agree with you entirely, to be honest. The Eagles still have one more loss on that schedule coming. Do I know when it is? Not exactly, but it's coming. They're not going to win the last 13 games of the season. I'll be surprised if they do. It's going to be next week in Washington. That's my little prognostication in the beginning here. And I do want to take a little credit. I called Buffalo beating Detroit in this one. I can't remember if you did or not as well. I think you
Oh
did
yeah,
too, actually.
yeah,
But
I
it was one
did.
of those, it's like Buffalo is that team right now. I think Josh Allen, and I'm sure we'll get into it later. He solidified that MVP yesterday. I think it's his for the taking. Like I said, I'm sure we'll get into it later. But Buffalo, they're geared up. They're ready to go, I think, at this point.
Yeah, and they're turning the corner. Everybody's saying to me, I've had a bunch of emailers, guys that I talked to, Vito down in Florida and Byron out in California. They always say to me, say, well, the Bills are letting up so many points. They're not stopping anybody. But you know what? At this point in the season, it's stacking the W's. You know what I mean? And you hate to be like that. And particularly, I watched the Chiefs game, and we'll get into particulars on the game. But you know they're winning ugly, man. They had 13 wins, but they are leaking oil as much as the Lions going into the playoffs. And you're just wondering, like, okay, is it going to be one of these four or the possibly five that we talked about? I just don't see a team jumping out, kind of like you. You remember, like the Giants finishing 9-7, and then they magically beat the Patriots in Super Bowl and everything. I just don't see a team like that this season.
Nah, there was a nice little run there. I think it was like 3 out of 5 or 6 years where the sixth seed came in and won the Super Bowl. And it's like I don't see that kind of talent and team wise in the league right now. I think it is going to be one of the halves. And if you're fortunate enough to be a fan of one of the lesser teams, you might steal a playoff win here, knock one of those four teams I should say out. But yeah, I think it's between the top tier.
Yeah, and the one team that's you got to be kind of fearful of, and the Eagles beat the doors off them, so I don't know if they should be, is the Rams. The Rams, they won a pretty good game out of Candles out in the Levi Stadium, wherever they're calling it out there in San Francisco on Thursday night, and they seem to be ascending at the right time. But other than the group that we talked about, I just don't see any of these other teams ascending and putting their best games together at this moment. Like you said, a lot of very bad teams, a, a kind of big middle, and then you have a little bit at the top. So if you think about going back to our statistics class we all had, the histogram, it's the middle is kind of fat, and then the bad teams are kind of large as well. So you know we're going to see how that plays out as we talk about the different games as going through week 15. We're here on Lloyd Vance's Insider Football on 1029 The Game, the Coast Sports Network. I'm here with Kevin Midgette. Um, Wanted to get your take on one of the bigger stories before we get to the games. Bill Belichick, a guy we said, okay, maybe he gets a job, gets an interview. He gets a job at University of North Carolina. Is this a good move, a strange move? What do you think in the terms of this?
It makes sense, to be honest. Any NFL situation, I believe, and there were talks with Belichick with different teams. He wants control of everything. And we're in a day and age now where teams just aren't going to do it. I mean, last time the Eagles did it was Chip Kelly, and Howie Roseman ended up in a closet down by the boiler room. I mean, the teams just aren't surrendering that kind of power anymore. And Belichick is 72 on top of that. And the fact is, he took a 5-year deal with North Carolina. It makes more sense for him to be in college, actually. And he's going to get the band back together, and number 2 pencil Patricia and all those guys will be there. So he'll have all his guys with him. I think it's a good fit for him, if he wants to coach one more time.
Yeah, and he's going to have his son Steve Belichick, who's kind of grooming to be take over for him, and possibly there may be a buyout for his son to take over, and I'm sure he'll have a key defensive role there. And as you said, the delineation in the NFL between the GM and the head coach it's not as smeared as it used to be. Clearly, the GMs that job is just way too big for having one person doing it as well and being the head coach, and he did want a lot of power. Some guys that I talked to said, yeah, he was in line for the Atlanta game, but when you had um, Raheem Morris come in there and he was willing to work with the existing general manager and they were all going to be on the same page, it just made the decision very easier. So, Belichick, I think he goes there. The funny thing was, I think something that factored in here, I want to get your take on is he's 14 wins away from the NFL's all-time leading record of Don Shula. But you have Andy Reid there who has Patrick Mahomes, and they keep winning season after season, 13 games, 14 games. And it's just going to be a matter of time before he catches Belichick. So did you think that factored into his decision?
I think, of course, I'm sure a little bit of it did, but it would be nice to hold the record for a little bit, be a little holder for it until, someone comes and breaks it shortly thereafter, sure. I just don't think he could have landed in a spot where he could have been guaranteed to get those wins within 2 seasons. The teams that were offering him the jobs weren't world beaters. They were, middle of the pack teams where you're going to have to develop it and cut it your way. And let's be honest, he's on a time crunch to, to get this done. So I think that also played into it.
Yeah, and then a thing is, you look at the younger guys today that he has to deal with, even young NFL players. I thought a lot of the Patriots were saying on his way out the door, he just couldn't relate to today's modern player. He wanted that, old school mentality. And his dad was a military guy and he grew up with that whole, my way or the highway attitude. And it was kind of grating on younger NFL players. It's going to be interesting to see how he works this in college because I guess he's selling to these young guys like Dion did at Colorado. All right, I can get you ready for the next level. I have the right guys here, but it's different now with these younger players. I was talking, Nate, my son who plays in college. It's all about NIL. It's about transfers. It's about playing time or I'm out of there. So college players are controlling the narrative a lot more. So you think Belichick's going to be okay with that, or we're going to see some fun here?
I think he's going to be okay with it because he has no other choice. And I think it also does well for him because you can treat it more like a professional NFL team environment as well. It's like you're here for 1 year, 2 years max, next, and then you bring in the next guy. I mean, you're talking about the NIL. Marshall had to pull out of their bowl game with Army because they had 25 guys enter the portal. 25 guys off your football team. So, I mean, it's just you pretty much have to grow up in this environment of coaching to be able to deal with it. And that is the one thing that's going to be interesting for Belichick. learning how to deal with how this is going to work now. It's a business now. It's just not coaching these guys.
Yeah, and it's going to be interesting to see how this shakes out, and hopefully it works out for him. But as you were saying, Chip Kelly comes to the NFL from college, and then you have other guys like Al Groh and Matt Rule, and they're just two different entities. The NFL game is so much different from college, and what worked in NFL is not going may not work in college, and vice versa. So, you wish Belichick the best, but I think it's be interesting to see. One of the good things he did do is he went to a program. Let's face it, North Carolina is a basketball school. There's no place to go but up for the football team, and now he's brought a buzz there, almost like Dion, what I was saying in Colorado, because Colorado was downtrodden. Nobody really cared about them, and now they're the number one teams on everybody's mouth right now. So Belichick there, and as you said, yeah, I think he does get the old crony group back together, Ernie Adams and Josh McDaniel and all his guys from Patriots. Now the thing is, it's like let's do it again. All the old timers. Can they do it one more time? And this time with college with some younger guys.
Yeah, and that's the thing also with the college playoff format. He gets an automatic bid into that playoff if they win the ACC. So I mean, it's a better road for him to travel, being that the ACC isn't a dominant powerhouse football school. The football schools. So if he can get that one spot, I mean, you're in the mix at that point.
Yeah, and a big thing, Kevin, I think is that transfer portal, like you talked about. He's going to hit it hard. Try to get some 5-star guys to come with him, and that's kind of how quickly Dion turned around Colorado. He just started, he made it a cool place to be, and a lot of times these guys they want another opportunity. Where they might be third string at like a Penn State, and next thing you know, they want to be a starter somewhere else. So going to be fun to watch. We're here on Lloyd Vance Insider Football on 1029 The Game, Coast Sports Network. I'm here with Kevin Midgette. We're going through news and notes around the National Football League, Week 15, and we'll preview Week 16 in a few minutes. Kevin, wanted to get your take on this before we talk about the game, and we had Bob Groats on last week. Great get. We'll get him back on again. He was very familiar covering the Eagles for so many years. Is there a problem in the Eagles locker room? I thought there was a point made right away. Uh, AJ Brown gets the touchdown, and then you have him and Jalen Hurts doing the kid and play dance and all that. And I know you and I didn't really get to talk about it last week, including with Bob about the situation. Um, is there a problem in the locker room? Do you think it's okay? And then can Nick Sirianni clean this situation up? You saw a big dust up on the sidelines in terms of Jalen Carter, the defensive line coach, and Nick Sirianni yesterday.
I don't know if Nick's the guy for this or not. I mean, it's the thing is, I think it happens on a lot of teams, if not most all teams. You're going to have somebody, especially the wide receiver, is prone to be the diva position. It's the Keyshawn Johnson, give me the damn ball, that kind of thing. And am I upset with AJ knowing that he was wide open, that Hurts isn't getting him the ball? Nah, if he wants to discuss that. I mean, we all have coworkers, discuss something that is unpleasant for you, that kind of thing. But the fact is, he aired it out during a 9-game winning streak. That's what it is. You usually hear that kind of stuff come out when there's losses, The fact that he brought it up during a winning streak, there's a little asterisk next to that right there. But you knew it was going to come out. You knew he was going to get the ball this week. And of course, everyone loves each other after, everyone gets a touchdown and they're happy. And once again, they're kid and play dancing.
Yeah, and I always say where there's smoke, there's fire. So obviously they need to sort some things out. But like you were saying, the head coach has got to be a figurehead. He's got to be a guy to control his narrative, particularly a guy like Sirianni. You talk about a Mike Tomlin type guy, where they are not in charge of one side of the ball. They're kind of just in charge of the whole thing, not running meetings and everything in position groups. And they got to have the pulse of the team. So their job is to bring that discipline, say enough's enough. Let's get it going. And it's crazy, like you're saying. The Eagles just won their 10th straight game, and we're talking about chemistry. Is there a problem with this team? It's just total drama around them. And it's interesting because a team you and I followed with the Eagles, Donovan McNabb and T.O. chimed in on this, and it seemed like Freddie Mitchell was the vehicle of it. T.O.'s like, Donovan came out and was saying, oh, Brandon Graham, he probably shouldn't have said it. Something. They're grown men. They should all talk to each other and get this over with. And and T.O.'s like, oh, maybe you should get a mirror. So you know, what are you thinking in terms of Donovan and T.O.? I mean, this beef that's over 20 years if I'm doing my math. I mean, what's going on with them two?
I remember being on radio when all this was going on, discussing the phone. The people would call up. We talked about Donovan and Tio, Donovan and Tio. And the one thing that did ring true was everyone's looking for Donovan to handle this, Donovan to step up, because Tio was just taking it to him through the media and everything else. So the fact that Donovan wants to call out Brandon Graham for actually saying something, they didn't have to go get Hugh Douglas to come down there and try to straighten out their locker room. They're trying to work it out on their own. So I think Donovan, that might have been one of the questions he should have stepped away from.
Yeah, and it's just like, all right, your former player, leave it in house, let them take care of it. And as usual, Don, we got the brunt
Mhm.
of people's ire, and everybody's on To's side, and To for the short period that he played for the Philadelphia Eagles, he was a legend. He carried that team. I was telling a younger emailer of mine, Caden, he was saying that was he really that important to the? And I said he carried that team to the Super Bowl the year the Eagles went to Jacksonville, and he played on a broken leg, and I think a lot of the animosity was McNabb kind of supported Westbrook when he got his extension. He didn't support T.O. And then the organization as a whole, they made T.O. kind of sign a waiver before that Super Bowl game, and just an ugly atmosphere. But I mean, I digress. That's like 25 years ago. I just thought it was just so funny. The beef is still there, and they can't bury the hatchet. So maybe McNabb, T.O., and Freddie can have a beer somewhere, and they can work it out between the three of them. But we're going to talk about the games from yesterday, and we'll start right here in Philadelphia where I am, and Kevin's pretty close to. I was talking to my buddy Byron, and I got to apologize again to the Eagles. you know, I I said after the Ravens went, okay, they're legit, but I picked against them this week. I thought the Steelers, even though they hadn't won in Philadelphia since 1965, I thought the Steelers had a chance because the Eagles are infighting and how bad they looked against Carolina. But just a dominant victory by the Eagles, 27-13. I'll let you comment, and then I'll go over some of these ridiculous stats that I was crunching from the game in terms of the Eagles.
It was an impressive win. I mean, especially the way they just took the ball from Pittsburgh at the end. And there was nothing Pittsburgh could do. Eagles were just running clock, running plays, and they dominated them. I mean, they showed that they didn't have to just run the ball; they threw the ball well. The Eagles' defense is the quietest catalyst of a team I've ever seen. It's like they get a little mention here and there, but everyone's talking about Jalen and AJ Brown and Saquon. That defense has carried them through this season.
Yeah, and they're dominant, and the offense came. I think they wanted to really show people, hey, we have a hand in this as well. Particularly, we talked about the beef between Brown and Hurts all week, and everybody talking about that. Where they're going to clean this up in the offense. They were only passing for about 180 yards in 9 straight victories, but in this game, Kevin, I'll go over the stats. It's just remarkable. The Eagles had 26 first downs to Pittsburgh's 10. They had 401 total yards to Pittsburgh's 163, 270 passing. There's only 107 for the Steelers. And then the one that you really pointed out, and I was like, man, Pittsburgh only had 2 drives in the second half. So the Eagles dominated time of possession. 39-52 to Pittsburgh's 20-08. So they were just holding the ball. They converted 10 of 17 third downs, where the Steelers only did 3 of 10, and they ran 77 plays to Steelers 41. So just a dominant effort. And they announced, hey, we are true contenders for not only the NFC, but possibly the Super Bowl. I know a lot of games to be played. We ran through the different schedules with different teams, and they need some help in terms of catching the Lions and or the Vikings at the top in the NFC. But what an effort by the Eagles, particularly Lane Johnson. Lane was incredible. TJ Watt, 0 sacks, 0 pressures in this game.
You don't see that. You don't see that at all because TJ Watt is one of the top three defensive linemen in this league, if not the best. So the fact you put that guy in check right there, the offensive line's been incredible. I mean, you thought with the loss of Jason Kelsey and everything, they were going to feel a little bit, of a sting from that. They're just plugging along business as usual. The one thing I'm concerned with the Eagles is the fact is it's almost like they're playing in the Brock Purdy form of they're playing ahead, and it's like don't make mistakes, don't lose the game for Jalen. I want to see them put in a situation where that defense does give up a touchdown or two early, like that Tampa Bay game, and then there was nothing they could do to come back. I want to see how it hurts in the rest of the team, how they react to a situation like that. Take a punch and then come back at them.
Yeah, I do agree with you that they mostly have been playing a lead. They've been getting that track meet mentality of the old Indianapolis Colts with Peyton Manning, where they get a big lead and then the defensive line, they were led by Dwight Freeney, but this group led by Jalen Carter, they pin their ears back when they have that big lead, and then they just force the other team to make mistakes. And the Eagles are one of the top teams in terms of takeaways, and I believe they have 35 sacks or so right now. So they're getting a lot of pressure on the quarterback and from a variety of guys. Milton Williams is playing extremely well for them. All the Georgia Bulldogs, remember when we first had who needs to step up? That was one of the topics you and I talked about at the beginning of the year. Well, all the Georgia Bulldogs on the Philadelphia Eagles have really come to play. Um, Kaylee Ringo's doing a nice job. N'Kobe Dean, even Jordan Davis seems to not. No one's talking about how out of shape he is this season. And then Nolan Smith finally getting home, and you can't talk about this defense without Jalen Carter. And the thing is, with Jalen Carter, I was talking to my son. Is he reminds me of Jerome Brown at this stage in his life. He seems to be finally getting it, and he's the defensive linchpin for these guys. Everything runs through him. But sometimes is he too overheated? He had that bad penalty yesterday, and then the dust up on the sideline I talked about earlier.
There's certain times you want to see a guy show motion, and there's certain times you don't. I'm okay how he's showing it right now. That team needs fire. They need somebody like that. It takes away from the distractions of the AJ Jalen drama and the Sirianni, just being bannered about the media. I want to see somebody on the field show some heart, get in there, and sometimes their emotions gets the best of them. But that's contagious. Other guys pick up on that vibe, especially when it comes from a leader like him, a young leader. So I think it's a good thing for the team.
Yeah, and he's definitely bringing that fire to that group, and you have guys like N'Kobe Dean who he understands. He's a veteran guy, and he can kind of talk to him. And Zach Bourne, you can't talk about this defense without talking about Zach Bourne. He's sideline to sideline. A guy came out of nowhere. He's 25 years old or so, 5 years in the National Football League, and the Saints give up on him. And Vic Fangio, last week we had Bob talk about this. Fangio, really, his design, his scheme, he's changed this group. Think about last year. I think they were ranked like 31 overall, and now they're a number one defense.
It's definitely it's Fangio without a doubt. You look at that Tampa Bay playoff game. Nobody wanted to hit anybody. Nobody was tackling anybody. I mean, Fletcher Cox, I think, had the most speed and stamina on that team at that point because everyone else was mailing it in. They were done for the year. So to take these guys who are still young enough that you haven't lost them yet, to turn them into the defense they've become, that is exactly Fangio for that.
Yeah, he's done a great job. And I know somewhere Sean decides, like, yeah, I tried. You know what
Yeah.
I mean? And at first I thought it was a scapegoat and everything, but Fangio's coming here, picked up the pieces. The draft picks have been incredible. Cooper DeJean did have a fumble yesterday, but him and Q Mitchell have done a great job in terms of outside and just a great overall defense. And like I said earlier, I just got to tip my cap to them. I thought it was a lot of, okay, they're beating the Browns, they're beating the Jaguars, but they're just dominant and a physical team. And that's what, that was always the Steelers' motto. The Steelers are a tough physical team. They're going to run the ball, attacking defense. And the Eagles just took them out of their element. They basically embarrassed them. Now, I do think the Eagles, the refs, it's crazy because, you and I, all the Eagles teams we followed growing up, the refs always seem to be against the Eagles. But there were a couple times I was like, wow, they got away with that, particularly Darius Slay, who got thrown out the club on that block
Mhm.
He he threw a punch, and then you had Q Mitchell coming here throwing a punch too, and then magically it was crazy. The Steelers got penalized twice, and the Eagles get no flags against them.
Yeah, Darius Slay, I think he ended up in the 5th row or something like that on the one. He literally, like, took him out of the end zone. But, it it's one of those you're like, "Okay, alright," I can't explain it myself. I'm used to the Eagles getting called for those things, so just take it as a win at that point.
Yeah, that's the thing. It is almost like earlier when C.J. Gardner Johnson. We all know he took his helmet off, and magically they said no, he didn't take his helmet off. So,
Mhm.
me, hey, I don't want to say it. Nate was saying to me earlier. He said, "Dad, it's looking a lot like 2017." We'll have to wait and see how it turns out. But I mean, this Eagles team, they're hitting on all the right keys. Big game this weekend at Washington, as you were pointing out earlier. We're talking about that. Dallas. I still don't. I watched a lot of Dallas yesterday. Cooper Rush is not very good. As long as the Eagles cover C.D. Lamb and block Micah Parsons, they'll be all right in that game. And then the Giants, we talked about that. They're just abysmal. I mean, they're a JV team. Whether it's Drew Lock, Tommy DeVito out there, they have no quarterback, no running game. A lot of their guys are hurt, and they say, you know what, just put me on IR. So, going to be a lot of changes for the Giants, but the Eagles seem to be in good shape. We're here on Lloyd Vance Insider Football on 1029 The Game, the Coast Sports Network. I'm here with Kevin Midgette. We're running through Week 15. Now, I wanted to talk to you about the NFL. They did viewers no favors. We were clicking back and forth. We had the red zone going. They put the Eagles Steelers game on the same time as the Bills and the Lions game. What did you think about that?
I can't remember seeing anything like it, to be honest, because you're lucky if you get one good 4 o'clock game, and that's usually the national one. So be it. Yesterday was topsy turvy because at the same time though, it was like it's just odd for the NFL to schedule 2 games like that at 4 o'clock.
Yeah, and then 1 o'clock slate. All of us had our fantasy football playoffs, so I had to buy, so I didn't really care. But everybody else was looking, and the 1 o'clock slate was not good. There were some really bad games. We'll get to some of them in a minute, but there wasn't much to watch there. And then for them to put those two games against each other, and it's just like, man, you're kind of sitting around all day. I love the 1 o'clock game. You have your morning brunch, whatever, and then all right, let's go. And this week you kind of had to wait until the late afternoon. So yeah, I just thought I was very odd, and maybe they'll do a better job scheduling.
Yeah,
Now,
it was definitely tough. Like where I was at, I had to work and don't have the packages or anything like that. So the 2 games I have on, of course, is Baltimore against the Giants. That was great. That was wonderful. And then on the other TV, at least I could find Washington and New Orleans, and that necessarily wasn't a barn burner on top of that. So yeah, I couldn't wait for the 4 o'clock games.
oh man, that's a rough watch there. At least I had the red zone, and they kind of jump around. But yeah, there was not much there. But speaking of the other big game of the week, the Bills defeat the Lions 48-42 in Detroit. What a great, I mean, it was a fun game to watch. 90 total points. The over under was 54.5, so they smashed that. And as you said, Josh Allen was the star of this game. Four total TDs, and there were over 1,000 total yards in this game. So do you like this version of football where it's run and gun, or are you more like, okay, there needs to be some defense played?
It's one of those things. I'll equate it to like baseball too, like regular season games. You want to see some offense. You want to make the game flow. You want to be entertained while you're doing it. But you get to postseason. In football, I want to see defense. In baseball, I want to see 1-0 pitchers duels. It's a different mentality, different type of ball at that point. So for a regular season game, for 2 teams you're not really interested in, and also 2 teams that have a lot of fantasy players going, you want to see that offense.
Yeah, and there was a ton of it. Josh Allen, 23 of 34, 362, 2 TDs, no interceptions. Goff threw the ball 59 times. I mean, I was like, wow, when I started looking at the numbers. So he was 38 of 59, 494 and 5 TDs. So he put up some serious numbers. It's crazy because a lot of people, he's available. Like he's a free agent quarterback in a lot of fantasy football leagues. And it was the first week of the playoffs, but he's put up some serious stats. In terms of the game, though, back and forth battle, wanted to get your take on Dan Campbell. What is he doing? He's down 10 points and he kicks it. Now in today's NFL, you have to say, there's no element of surprise. So he decides to go for an onside kick. Obviously, doesn't get it. And then the Bills go down and score really quickly after Matt Collins picks it off and runs it down to like the 15-yard line. So, what did you think of that decision?
I think it's just a different game now with the kicking and everything else. I mean, I, the success rate for it's insane anymore. It's like it really is like a needle in a haystack kind of thing to try and do it. But it's a game. It's to prevent concussions and contact and everything else, and it's just part of the game at this point.
Yeah, and then he came out today and said, yeah, he shouldn't have did that. And then, there's still plenty of time on the clock for him to win the game. And in terms of the game itself, you couldn't watch this game without talking about the greatness of Josh Allen. As you said, he was just dominant in this one, willing his team to victory. Um, did a great job in terms of running the football as well. 11 rushes, 68 yards. Whenever they needed a first down, he was able to get it. The Buffalo Bills had 559 total yards in this game. Their defense, they're a little banged up too. And then the Lions, we talk about all these injuries, and we talked about Montgomery, Davis, McNeil. Are they going? Are their Lions going to be able to hold this top seed? And are the Bills the cream of the AFC, or are they going to catch the Chiefs?
I well, when we talked about the Detroit Buffalo game last week, and I believe I said it, I was like, Detroit's going to lose that game because it cost a game, and which is evident in that point. Buffalo, I mean, yeah, I think they're the best team right there. I mean, they've beaten Kansas City this year. Kansas City has the wherewithal factor, the fact they've been there, they've actually won the title game and everything else. But I think Buffalo is the team to beat, and they're down in the AFC.
Yeah, and it's going to be interesting. I don't think they're going to catch the Chiefs. The Chiefs, they have some tough games coming up. Houston, at Pittsburgh, at Denver. But they do have that 2-game lead over the Bills. I just don't see them losing 2 of 3, and then Buffalo will be able to sneak in there. It may come down to that last game at Denver, where KC has to get it done. But I think the road through the AFC is going to go through KC. Now the NFC, as we said, it's up in the air. Um, the Lions are leaking so much oil. I still think the Eagles may get that #1 seed and be able to host that playoff game. But yeah, we're gonna have to see how it shakes out. And the Lions, great story, and everybody's picking them as a favorite and everything. But there's just a lot against them. Losing Montgomery is going to be huge for them. Speaking of Montgomery, did any of your 11 teams make the fantasy football playoffs?
Oh yeah, I got plenty in. Don't get me wrong. The big money one I didn't, but like I've done in the past, I have to work on my side hustle. So because you still have to play the 2 week playoff and everything. So I find the guy I'm playing with. I'm in the 5 spot. He's 6. I was like, all right, let's throw a couple shekels on this and play each other for 2 weeks. So I did something that I can't believe I actually did, and it paid off because my quarterbacks were Russell Wilson, who I wasn't playing against Philadelphia, C.J. Stroud, who's had kind of a pedestrian year this year. He's been up and down. I was like, all right, it's not the big money playoffs, but it's my side hustle. Let me go on the waiver wire. I pick up Aaron Rodgers from the Jets.
Wow.
To pick up Aaron Rodgers, who kicks out 30 points. I was like, where was this guy at all year long? And now he can start the last couple weeks now to start playing like a quarterback.
Yeah, he had a big game, and we'll touch on that one in a minute. It's like, wow, where have they been? And luckily for me, I had to buy because my team, they only scored about 105 points. I would have been cooked. So, but there were some great efforts around the National Football League. And we're here on Lloyd Vance Insider Football on 1029 The Game, Coast Sports Network. We'll start talking about the games Thursday night, this was a fantasy football killer. It was crazy because a lot of people played a lot of Rams and a lot of Niners. Well, guess what? The weather was terrible out there in San Francisco. The Rams win 12-6. Puka Nacua, for me, he did get about 17 points in this one, and I was able to pick up Garendo, who gutted it out from his foot injury to get about 11 or so. But talk about this game and the fantasy football implications of that one.
It was definitely a killer for some guys that I know, that's for sure. One guy had three different Rams going and everything else. The one thing I noticed in that game, though, as soon as the first quarter was about to end and it was 3-0, jump on that under right away because it's like you just realize nobody's scoring. So I will say I did jump on the under there, and that was nice. I've never rooted for field goals more in my life. That's right, kick another field goal, yeah. Um, that was one of those games that we were talking about. That could be San Francisco's last breath in that one to see if they had anything left to make a push here. And the one thing that might actually hurt the Eagles is if you see what San Francisco team shows up to play Detroit in 2 weeks.
Yeah, and the thing is with the Niners, they're working through injuries. Well, they got Greenway back in this one, and he got hurt. He hurt his knee, and it's a situation. I wanted to talk to you about this. Linebacker Devondre Campbell, he was all bad because Greenlaw got the start and everything, and he didn't. They tell him to go in the game, and he says, "No, I'm not going in," and he kind of walks off. Now he's been suspended for the next 3 games for the Niners. I remember Davis quitting at halftime for the Colts a couple years. I think it was the Bills. I can't remember what team he was on then when he did it. But what do you think it is? And is it? I mean, is this crazy? I think it was.
Yeah, it's one of those things that's always spoken about is like you never quit on your teammates. You can be mad at the coach, you can be mad at ownership, but those guys that you play with on the field, you show up for. And all the injuries that they were going through, and they needed him at that point, to step on the field, and he wouldn't do it. And at that point, nobody wants him on that team. I don't know of a team that would want to pick him up at that point. Why would you risk bringing that into your locker room?
Yeah, he's probably going to be a lot like Antonio Brown after he did what he did, quitting in the middle of the game for the Bucks. Nobody, he's a cancer. Nobody wanted to touch him, and I think Campbell, words out around the league, and it'll probably be the end of his career. He is a guy that has been around for a little while, so maybe he's going to quit anyway. But that was just crazy. I was just like, wow. Now, in terms of the game, though, Stafford is looking really sharp. The defense for the Rams with Verse and the rest of those guys is really getting after people. And the Rams are one of those teams that could be dangerous down the stretch. Um, and their schedule's kind of favorable. They're at the Jets. They have the Arizona, who's up and down, and then they have Seattle. You're really not sure what's going on there because of Geno Smith's injury. So, can the Rams win the NFC West? I know we talked about for a number of weeks how you could throw any of these teams in a bag, but right now they are the number three seed in the NFC and the number one overall in the NFC West. So, they're going to be able to hold this, or are they going to have to worry about like the Cardinals jumping up and catching
Well, for the third week in a row, Lloyd, I'm going to switch my mind about the NFC West.
them?
Seattle had me last week. This week, let's go with the Rams. How about that? They are clicking at the right time, and they do have enough guys on that team that remember winning a Super Bowl and being around that kind of environment. So they're the team. They're one of those teams that could be tricky if they get in the postseason. They could pull the upset and knock one of those teams out. Do I think they can get to the Super Bowl? Probably not, but they can definitely pull off an upset win in the playoffs.
Yeah, and the thing about the Rams is interesting. Cooper Cup, he got a big fat zero in that game in terms of fantasy football. No catches or anything. I know that killed some guys that were emailing me and talking about that. But they're talking about maybe bringing in Odell Beckham. He was cut recently by the Dolphins. I don't know how much he has left in the tank. Maybe they'll bring him out there and then, But Robinson's done a nice job for them. Tutu Atwell, and they've been spreading the football around with Kyron Williams and the rest of the guys. So the Rams have a lot of talent. Stafford, yes, he's 36, but he's looking still pretty spry, and they're a team you definitely got to watch. And the Niners, as you were kind of alluding to earlier, I think they're kind of cooked. Um, the interesting thing with them is Brock Purdy. What do you do with him? He's still got 1 year left on his rookie deal. Is he worth $40 million, $50 million as starting quarterback in the National Football League?
In this day and age, sure, why not? I mean, you see the money like Kirk Cousins gets and everything else. Trevor Lawrence is getting paid. Brock Purdy for 40 million might be a discount deal. It's just the money's absurd that's being thrown around these days. And you also have to think about with the team that you have, if Purdy's not the answer, then you're gonna have to draft somebody. And where they draft at usually, even this year, it's gonna be somewhere in the middle of the pack. You're gonna have to move up to get a higher draft pick to get a quarterback, a franchise type quarterback, unless you want to bring some free agent off the pot. So I mean, Purdy might just be the way to go for another contract.
Yeah, I think they hold on to him at the minimum going into next season. They kind of let him play, maybe franchise him, but I don't think he's going anywhere. And we talk about there's not many quarterback prospects coming out in this draft, and yeah, do you go get a bridge guy and bring him in there? But Purdy's been in that system. He's very efficient. I think the guy that's probably going to leave is Debo Samuel. To probably step away from him. You can clearly see he's lost his step. Um, and Jennings has played pretty well for them, and they drafted Pearsall in the first round this year. So I think the Niners will move forward with Purdy. But yeah, you had the Rams making a statement there. They've taken a game lead in the NFC West, and I think they're going to move forward. So we're here on Lloyd Vance Insider Football on 102.9 The Game, Coast Sports Network. I'm here with Kevin Midgette. We're talking about Week 15, and in a few minutes, we'll start previewing Week 16 around National Football League. We're also sprinkling in some news and notes. This game, the Dallas Cowboys are now 6-8 over Carolina Panthers, 30-14. I mean, the Panthers, yeah, they have some fight in them, but they're one of those teams just awful. You can almost they're like a homecoming team. I think that's why everybody here in Philadelphia was so upset when the Eagles barely beat them. Did you take anything away from this? I did see Cooper Rush had some nice throws in this one. CeeDee Lamb had a pretty good game, and Micah Parsons had 2 sacks.
The one thing I saw out of this game was it was the first time I believe the Carolina Panthers have been favored going into a game and going on 3 years.
Yes.
It might be another 3 years before it happens again, Lloyd. I don't know if the hype was just too much. They couldn't live up to it. But, yeah, Dallas roasted them. That one was over pretty quick.
Yeah, you're talking about a sucker bet, man. It's Carolina was a 3-point favorite, so they lost outright. And the over-under, this was interesting too, Kevin, when I was looking at this. Over-under was 43.5. They scored 44 for the over. So it was like, wow. Maybe Vegas got their money back on the over-under. But definitely, yeah, I think everybody was betting Dallas heavy in that one because Carolina, that was a shocker that they were a favorite. Kansas City Chiefs, they're now 13-1. They go to Cleveland, get the win. Hooray, hooray. 21-7. I mean, but it's just like, all right, every week you're like, well, this wasn't a nail biter, but it was just like, it was ugly. And you got to see one of your favorite guys. Carson Wentz came into the game late because Patrick Mahomes got rolled up. He had a pretty bad ankle injury. He limped off the field. I'm hearing that he's week to week. But what did you think of this game?
I think as much as anyone else thought of it. Kansas City won. Cleveland, once again, carrying out this season that they can't wait to get over with, that's for sure. I think it's imperative for Kansas City to get that 1 seed locked up and rest Mahomes the back end of the season. You can't have him banged up at all. Not the way this team's been playing. You need him full 100%. So the quicker they can get this number 1 seed wrapped up, the better off they'll be.
Yeah, I agree. And maybe like 2022 where he was a little banged up and everybody's like, oh, he was kind of milking it, and when you saw him run around the Super Bowl, but he's a gamer. I think he's going to play as much as possible. But if they can win 2 of these next 3 games and possibly sit out that last game, that'll be huge for them because they are probably going to have the bye, and then they'll have that first week off, and they'll get healthy. And we all know how Andy Reid is after a bye. The Chiefs in that divisional round, they're more than likely going to win. So good win for them. Bolton had a very nice game for them. He had a nice interception where he ripped the ball from the guy. A lot of tackles in this one. They're starting to get Pacheco back in the mix running the football. He's their main guy again. But Travis Kelce's just not doing a lot. Is it Taylor Swift? Is he done? What's going on with Travis Kelce?
I think Travis Kelce just has his priority somewhere else now. I think he's already worked on the after football life. His brother's already doing it. They've gotten their big contract for the podcast. He's gotten all the Taylor Swift attention and news and everything else. And I think the guy, I think he loves to play football and he wants to play football, but I don't think his heart's 100% into it at this point.
Yeah, it's like I don't know. He's just not getting open and not getting the ball. And Gray is really. I have Kelsey, I do, and
Mhm.
Gray is ultraing him all the time. But
Mhm.
maybe it's a situation where Gray's the guy that's getting open. So, and Mahomes, he's trying to get the ball out of his hands. Now, the interesting thing is they are probably going to get Hollywood Brown back. They opened his practice window from a bad shoulder injury, so they'll have him. They'll have D Hop. So they're getting a lot of guys healthy. The key, though, is that offensive line. Patrick Mahomes has been sacked over 35 times this season, the most in his career. And they thought DJ Humphries could come in there at the tackle position and help them. He pulls a hamstring. He couldn't play this week. They put Thuney out there. And Thuney, he's an all-pro guard, but that's just tough asking him to go out to left tackle.
Yeah, it's too much ground to cover at that point. A lot of foot speed that has to get there, get outside to stop the edge rush. If you can't keep Mahomes upright, you're not going to win games. And if you get him banged up, you're not going to win games. So that's something they definitely have to figure out.
Yeah, and Andy Rick Burkholder, the trainer there, they'll do their best to get Mahomes out there. He'd probably have all kind of special treatment and stuff, but I think he'll be back playing next week, and we'll go from there. In terms of other games around the National Football League, Houston Texans, they're now 9-5. They beat the Miami Dolphins 20-12. I took this away from this, as you said, the Texans are winning games, but it's just not convincing. And then the other side of it, Tua just looked terrible in this game for the Dolphins. Threw some bad interceptions, and Miami just couldn't get anything going.
That was a bad beat by Miami. They needed to win that game. They win that game, they're in that playoff mix. You sit there and end up losing that game. Now all of a sudden, you need a lot of things to start breaking your way. And you're right about Houston. They're not even going to Joe Mixon like this past game like they had been as well. That was actually very successful for them. So I just don't understand the play calling down there. Some of these games, they have talent there, but it just doesn't. You don't see it week to week.
Yeah, and Slowick is a hot name around the National Football League, their offensive coordinator. But as you said, something's amiss there. I don't know if it's not having Diggs or what it is. Collins only had, he did have 2 touchdowns, but I think he had less than 20 yards receiving in this game. I think the biggest problem is their offensive line. They've got to fix that thing. I mean, C.J. Stroud is running for his life. He's under pressure under most of his dropbacks, and I think he's not comfortable. Houston did wrap up the weak AFC South in this one with 9 wins, and they will be in the playoffs. But they have a lot to fix, and particularly the offensive line, as I said, in their defense. Anything else on that game you want to cover?
I think the big thing to take away was that basically cooked Miami in this playoff mix. They needed that win bad. They couldn't go get it. Try to salvage a season for what it started with, and now they're pretty much needing They need to win out basically and have some losses go their way.
Yeah. Now, does McDaniel survive this with the Dolphins? He was a genius and everything, and they have all the track guys. They have more speed than anybody in the NFL, but you get them in cold weather, you get them away from Miami, and they're just not the same team.
I think they like to hold on to geniuses for an extra year or so when they're young and everything else, and all the monikers they have. They're going to play the injuries into a factor earlier this year and everything else. So I think he gets one more year.
Yeah, I agree. Stephen Ross, the owner down there, Chris Greer's the general manager. They seem to believe in him, but they got to get some more offensive line help. That defense is just so inconsistent. They lost Phillip again to another season-ending injury, and that really hurt this group. So Miami, as you said, underachieving season. A lot of people were like, "Oh, they're going to challenge the Buffalo Bills for that division." Well, the Bills have won that division for the fifth straight season, and Josh Allen's just dominant. And Tua hopefully stays upright, with all the concussions and everything. Um, I just think he's a quarterback that's only going to take you so far. So we're here on Lloyd Vance Insider Football on 1029 The Game, Coast Sports Network. Next game we'll hit on. You picked him up in fantasy. Aaron Rodgers had a nice game, but it was a back and forth battle with the Jacksonville Jaguars. The Jets now 4-10. Woohoo! They
Hmm.
beat the Jaguars 3-11, 32-25 in this one. They did the Jets were a road favorite at 3.5. They covered that. Also, the over was hit in this one, and what I took away from this one, Jacksonville's just a bad team, and Doug Peterson, you could see it on his face. He's kind of finishing out the string. They got Mac Jones out there instead of Trevor Lawrence. Um, the Jets had a little bit of fight in this one, but I think it should have been easier. It was a struggle for them.
Well, that's what happens when you're not a good enough team. You know, it's like for the all the weeks they played good defense and couldn't score. You go to Jacksonville and Mac Jones of all people starts hanging points on you like that. But now Aaron Rodgers decides he wants to play quarterback. And I don't know if Aaron Rodgers the last 2 weeks is trying to think about, well, I want to play for somebody else next year, even if it won't be with the Jets. He's trying to show everyone he still has something left in the tank or what. But I find it hard to believe he's playing like that now, and he couldn't do that all season long.
Yeah, it's interesting. He's such a me guy, and there's always circumstances you're like, all right, is this really a true picture of him? Does he give a crap? You know what I mean, because
Yeah. Yeah.
sometimes you think he really doesn't, and he didn't go to mini camp. He missed some of training camp, and what did he think he was going to get? And these are younger guys, so he's 41. I'm not sure if he's on under contract or not for the Jets, but he's obviously going to be someplace else. And I was talking with Nate about this, and I'll get your take. Say a team like the Tennessee Titans who really need a quarterback and they don't want a rookie, win now mode. They, would they take a chance on Aaron Rodgers or some other team? Um, I don't know. I'll throw out what other teams you think of might want him, and do you think he'd be interested?
Well, I think if you're Aaron Rodgers, of course you want to play for the big market teams because once again he's a me guy. He wants his name out there and he wants people talking about him. Looking at a job like, say, once again, we're just throwing it out there, Tennessee. You're in a division now where your only real competitive team to beat is Houston because you got Jacksonville, Indianapolis. You got a lot of meh teams out there. So if you put yourself in a division where you have a clearer path to get into the playoffs, that might be the option to go. I don't know if his ego will let him do that, but that would be an option.
Yeah, they'd be a team, and just looking around, there's really I can't see many landing spots for him. Most of these teams have a young quarterback, or they're going to go into the draft. I couldn't see him going to the Raiders. You know what I mean? The
Yeah.
Raiders are probably going to either get Shador, and next thing Tom Brady owns a portion of the team. He's not going to bring in Aaron Rodgers. So they're not the mix. And another interesting one I want to get your take on is Cleveland came out and Jimmy Haslam, their owner, gave the dreaded vote of confidence. He gave it to his GM Andrew Barry. He gave it to Stefanski, the head coach, and they said they are bringing back Deshaun Watson next season. I think it has a lot to do with that $92 million guarantee that they owe him over the next 2 seasons. But they're bringing Watson back. They're going to need something because Jameis is terrible. So, what do you think about that Cleveland situation?
I think they have no other option than to bring Deshaun Watson back at this point. But I'm just guessing Deshaun's going to have some sort of injury that's going to pop up in October, and he's going to be done for the rest of the season again. I just have a theory on that, that contract right there. I mean, what if a vote of confidence to the GM and the head coach? I remember Chazinski got fired from the Browns back in like early 2000. I was around like 2012, 11, something like that. He won like 2 games or something like that, and he got fired after 1 year. It's like it's Cleveland. What do you expect him to do? You
Yeah,
know, and it's
yeah.
like, I don't know.
Freddie Kitchens, Hugh Jackson. I mean, it's
Yeah.
where coaches go to die. You want you want a lot of these guys want an opportunity to be a head coach, but sometimes it's okay to say no. You know what I mean? Just sit and wait. And I think that's what Ben Johnson really did with the Lions. He said, "All right, I'll go back for another season. A lot of these teams that are looking at me are crap. The have-nots that we talked about, and it's a no-win situation. And you know what? I'll save myself some aggravation. So yeah, I thought that was crazy that they like it made sense in terms of the money that they've spent on it, but why you bring back Deshaun Watson? He's done, he's washed, and he's just not much left in terms of his career. We'll look at a couple more of these games, and then we'll move on to the next slate. How about the Washington Commanders? They're 9-5. They were sweating because they
Mm.
go down to the Saints. Um, the guy Horner that started the game, he was terrible, and I think they knocked him out. And they bring in Spencer Rattler, the rookie, came in there, and Rattler and the Saints made it pretty close. It came down to a 2-point conversion at the end that probably should have been caught. It was a tough catch, but the Commanders were so glad to get a victory and get out of there. Now 9-5, and they're still in the mix for a wild card spot in the NFC. But talk to me a little bit about this game and where you see both teams going.
Commanders definitely couldn't afford to lose that game right there. I mean, they need to start putting some stuff together here to get ready for the playoffs as well. Get in there. New Orleans, the best thing that could have happened to them was not getting that 2-point conversion. If you're a New Orleans fan, I want a better draft pick. I don't need you to beat Washington. Don't catch that ball. Give me an opportunity to move up a slot or two. So it's a game Washington definitely had to have. It would have been a bad loss since they controlled that whole game as well.
Yeah, and in this game as well, the Saints had Alvin Kamara get banged up, and you wonder if they're probably shut him down. He has a groin injury, and you just wonder. You're seeing it all around the NFL. All right, guys are making business decisions. All right, there's 3 weeks left. My team stinks. It put me on IR, and then I don't have to live through this trek. Bring a guy up from the practice squad, and that's where a lot of these teams are. Particularly, as you said, the Saints are kind of finishing the string out. Taysom Hill got hurt, and their season's really going awry. Derek Carr, that's gonna be interesting. They have 1 year left on his deal. I think they step away from him. They've obviously fired Dennis Allen. They're going to bring in a new head coach, and why not bring in a new quarterback as well? But yeah, that Washington was lucky, and the Saints and their fans, they'll be glad that they didn't win those games. I remember, the Eagles a couple times where they were really bad teams, and you're like, what are you winning these games for down the stretch? It really doesn't make sense. You're only ruining your draft position, and um, the Saints need a lot of help in a variety of places. Speaking of a team that is just falling apart, is the New York Giants. Now, great win for the Baltimore Ravens, where you are. Um, not James, Lamar Jackson, 5 TD passes. I mean, he's looking like he's MVP race. We all know it's Josh Allen, but talk about this effort, and can Lamar Jackson take over the MVP race from Josh Allen?
I think the NFL wants no parts of giving Lamar another MVP trophy. It's like nobody likes to sit there and just keep giving the same guy trophy after trophy, even though they deserve it sometimes. Josh Allen, I think, has definitely won his. And the fact is, with the amount of losses the Ravens have compared to Buffalo, I mean, his performance on the field hasn't been that much different than Josh Allen's, where you can say he's clear cut a better choice for MVP. That being said, Lamar Jackson and the Baltimore Ravens, it's all been about postseason play. Everyone knows they can win games during the regular season. So if it's another season where, Lamar, he's top 3 finisher in the MVP voting, but they lost their first playoff game, it's all for naught again.
Yeah, and this week's going to be a huge week. They're playing the Pittsburgh Steelers. They have a chance to catch them for the top of the division. And as you said, yeah, Lamar's numbers are great. He has 37 total touchdowns and only 3 interceptions, and Josh Allen similar, 37 and 5 interceptions. But it's the record. The Bills have played spectacularly in the biggest games, and he has some huge victories. Particularly, he's beaten the Chiefs, he's beaten the Lions. So I think it's Josh Allen's award to lose, and Lamar's playing great. The only thing is, I still think he's a little hesitant to use his legs. He's trying to prove that he's a passer, sometimes forcing the ball in there, but doing a great job against the lesser teams. Huge game against Steelers. We'll look at that in a minute. So good win for the Ravens, and the Giants, as I said, are just abysmal. I just don't know how Brian Dable is going to survive this thing. That roster is just depleted. Yes, he was coach of the year a couple years ago, and the Mariners usually don't like to change their coach, but do you think Dable survives?
No, like we were talking about at the beginning of the show, I think it's a clean out. I think you get rid of everyone from the general manager all the way down, and you just start anew.
Yep. And the last game, couple games we'll hit real quick. The Bucks are now 8-6. They beat the Chargers. The Chargers, they just got dominated this one. And the Bucks they're a dangerous team. We talked about the Eagles don't want to see them Is this good Baker playing with the Bucks and they're moving in the right direction? Do you think they're going to win the NFC South now?
Well, we'll see what the Falcons have left in the tank tonight. As horribly, I should say, as Atlanta's played over the last month, Kirk Cousins in particular, they need to win that Raiders game. If they lose that Raiders game, they're done. So, I mean, even though they do have the two-game advantage over Tampa Bay, the tiebreaker, but Tampa Bay, they're coming on at the right time, and they could be a tough out for somebody that especially that Philadelphia team that we spoke of.
Yeah, I could see them winning a wild card round game, and that's going to be fun to see if they can do that once again. Just like last year, they won in that round, and then they were kind of overmatched in the next game. But you have Mike Evans trying to get his 1,000 yards, and the defense is playing very well with Vita Vea, despite having some injuries on that side of the ball for the Bucks. So good win for them. Last game we'll talk about before we get to game balls and lackeys. The Green Bay Packers, they go to Seattle and dismantle the Seattle Seahawks 30-13. Very good win for them. They seem to be improving at the right time, particularly on defense. Jordan Love, very efficient with the football. And then on the other side of it, they knock Geno Smith out of the game for the Seahawks.
That's we've spoken about before on the show. Like Green Bay's that team that gets in the wild card. They're going to be a problem. Somebody's going to have to knock that team out. And with the experience they have from the postseason last year, it's a tough matchup for somebody. If they start clicking, this is right now when you have your team, you want to start seeing them move forward in the right direction. You don't want to see some sporadic losses here or there. And Green Bay rattles off some wins right here. They're going to at the right spot.
Yeah. Yeah, they're definitely a team that's dangerous. And as long as Love is playing well, they're going to be a tough out. All right, we're going to get to everybody's favorite part of the show, game balls and lackey for the week here on Lloyd Vance's Insider Football on 102.9, the Game Coast Sports Network. Game ball winner, I'll go first, and I'll take the obvious one. I'm giving it to Josh Allen. He was just incredible in that victory over the Lions that we talked about a lot. 23-34, 362, 2 TDs passing, 2 TDs rushing. He had 6 first downs in the game. That just shows you his dominance. And he also had 659 total yards in terms of the team for Buffalo. So great win for them. Another MVP type performance. So he's my game ball winner.
Yeah, Josh Allen, he's putting up mad numbers right now, like you're playing a video game. It's like that guy's just going up and down the field. And you thought with losing Stephon Diggs that would hurt them. If anything, they're playing better offense this year than they did when they had Stephon Diggs. My game ball, though, on the other hand, goes to Baker Mayfield and his 4 touchdowns.
Whoa.
Nobody thought Baker Mayfield was throwing 4 touchdowns. I put that up there with the Sam Darnold 5 touchdowns the week before. So Baker Mayfield, for nobody seeing this coming, he gets my game ball.
And some other guys get shout out. Jalen Hurts played a very good game, shutting up everybody, talking about A.J. Brown and all that stuff. Had a great game for the Eagles. Derek Stingley Jr., 2 big picks for the Texans. In terms of lackey, I think you talked about there's a couple quarterbacks, and we've given him the lackey before, but I got to tell you, Jameis Winston, he's terrible. He got benched in this game. DTR came in for the Browns. He was 16 of 25, 146 yards, no TDs, 3 interceptions, and he could have had more. Sacked 5 times in that loss for the Browns. And then fantasy football wise, he had negative .36 was his point total. So he gets my lackey.
First of all, who's starting? I want to know who's starting Jameis Winston in their fantasy playoffs right now because I don't know how the hell you made it there. The one thing I'll say about Jameis Winston in that game, he didn't walk off the field. So for that, Devondre Campbell, you get my lackey of the week. You quit on your team, you quit on your teammates, and you probably just ended your NFL career with your selfish actions. So he's definitely my lackey of the week.
Great pick. And some other guys that deserve the Donkey Award are Will Levis. He's terrible. The Titans, they should not play him anymore. And then I talked about Cooper Kupp, no catches, and Dan Campbell with that strange onside kick that everybody knew wasn't going to work. So they're the lackeys that we're going to talk about this week. Now we're going to talk about quickly week 16 here on Lloyd Vance Insider Football. I'll throw a couple games, marquee games. Pittsburgh Steelers are at the Baltimore Ravens. I just see the Steelers. I watched a lot of that game with the Eagles. They just seem kind of be a miss in terms of their offensive line. They're not moving the football well. Particularly George Pickens is not playing. That's a big loss for them at the receiver position. So I think Baltimore needs this game. They want a chance to win this division, and Lamar's playing at a high level. They're going to want to beat the Steelers in this one.
The one thing I will say going into this game, and I've seen enough Baltimore Pittsburgh games over the years where I live, it's going to be an under game. You're going to see a lot of Boswell and Tucker, and the fact is, you better hope if you're Baltimore, Tucker's making his field goals that day and extra points. So I look at it as like one of those slobber knocker games they call them back in the day, and a lot of field goals. So we'll see how that plays out.
Yeah, it's going to be a fun one to watch. So, and the thing is, Kevin, all the buys are over, and now there's going to be games Thursday, which is the Browns and the Bengals. We're both. I'm taking the Bengals. I think you are there. And then the
Same.
game Saturday, you have Houston Texans at the Chiefs. That's at 1 o'clock on NBC, and we'll see if Patrick Mahomes is playing in that one. And then the Steelers and the Ravens at 4:30 on Saturday. So great slate there. And then Sunday you have the regular slate of games, and then on Monday you have a game. So lots of football this week coming up in Week 16. That Houston Texans at the Kansas City Chiefs. Now, I'll say Patrick Mahomes is going to play in this one, and in this one, C.J. Stroud coming out of the dome. They have just had problems away from Houston. I think that Kansas City finds a way to win another miracle. I'll say they block a punt and return it for a touchdown to win that one. So they hit their whole bingo card.
I'll go you one better. Kansas City wins by the Texans punting from their own end zone, step out of the end zone, get called for a safety, and that's how the Chiefs win by 2.
Yeah, we know it's going to be a close win probably for the Chiefs, and it's crazy how Mahomes and Andy Reid keep pulling a rabbit out of the hat. But I wonder in the playoffs if it's really going to be effective, because you see that a lot of times. In the end, a lot of luck runs out in the playoffs when the real action starts. But yeah, I think the Chiefs win that one. Um, some of these other games are real dogs that we were talking about. I won't even touch on the Eagles at the Commanders. So the Eagles, this is a letdown spot. They have to watch out. They've won 10 straight games. Everybody's real happy about the way they were physical and blew out the Steelers. I went over all the numbers earlier. It was just dominant game. And Washington squeaks by the Saints. But this is a divisional battle. And my thing is, though, I'm not picking against the Eagles no more. I don't want to hear all my Vance cousins that are season tickets saying I'm a hater. So I'm going with the Eagles. I think that Hurts has another big game. Saquon Barkley, who I want to get your take on in terms of that. Is he injured? How's he going to do in this game?
I think Saquon's at the point now. I think we can sort of put to rest the Eric Dickerson record, because I think he now needs around 140 a game, something like that. It was 120, now it's like at 140. I think it behooves the Eagles to try to give this guy some rest. Kenny Gainwell played well the touches he got in that game. So you might want to just throw a couple like Kenny's way and, save Saquon a little bit. I'm calling it the upset of the week. Washington takes out Philadelphia in the letdown factor after the win. They set a franchise record by winning 10 games in a row, the Eagles did, and it ends next week.
All right, everybody, send your nasty tweets to at Philly Kevin. You can send them to him, and I know all the Philadelphia people are like boo, but
Oh, yeah.
I do think that, and you almost want to get a loss under your belt before you go into the playoffs. It's going to be fun to see. So uh, all the other games, I'm thinking the favorites are going to win, but those are the slate that we're going to look at. Angel, what do you think? Do you think the Eagles lose or win to the Commanders this week? All right, and I think the key guy is going to be Terry McLaurin. A lot of fantasy football playoff folks are hoping that McLaurin has a big week. Jaden Daniels, the Eagles did a good job keeping him in check last time. So another great week here on Lloyd Vance's Insider Football on 102.9 The Game, the Coast Sports Network. Thanks for Angel behind the glass doing a great job. Kevin, as always, great analysis. Anything else, Kevin, before we close it?
I think that'll wrap it up because we got 2 football games going on right now. We got to see what's going on. See if the Vikings, the Bears game, and then we got the Raiders and Falcons.
All right, guys. So we'll keep talking about it. We'll talk about week 16, and then we'll get you ready for week 17 here on Lloyd Vance Insider Football. Thanks for joining us.